Thank you very much, and we will now move to the panel discussion. So if I can ask Kevin and Ben to come up and take a microphone spot, and I think I'm going to be fed some questions from... We've had questions coming in through the webcast. There's been an opportunity for people to post questions, but in the initial phase, I can't think anybody would want to ask me a question. That's not a prompt. Please do indicate whether you'd like to ask a question within the room.
Are these chairs quite low? Do we look like teeny tiny panelists? Just checking.
I'll stay standing. Kelsey.
I guess this question could be addressed to all of you, and I think it's a very interesting aspect that we need to consider, especially when we think of releasing confidential patient information. How do you foresee this continuing as we start to include more genomic biomarker information for, personalized and preventative medicine that uses genomic information, and how will that affect, the confidentiality and release of patient information? That can go to whoever wants to take it.
I'm going to pass it to Kevin to answer that one.
In principle, sorry, it's right in my eye line. Let's move that out of the way.
It's because you're so teeny tiny.
Yes, right. You and me both. But in principle, I don't know that... Sorry, I can see somebody's... Maybe I need to get close to this microphone. I don't know that it really impacts any of the principles that have been discussed. I mean, for me, data will become more and more transparent. That is, more and more of it will become available. And whether a part of that involves a big chunk of genomic data, either captured as part of the trial or sometimes after through retrospective tissue evaluation, I don't think that has... I can't think, I'll ask Ben, I don't think that has any bearing on the principle of, on the big issues that have been discussed. It just opens up a richer source of data. It may lead to a situation where you more accurately, or after the fact more accurately, identify patients who are benefiting most based upon some genomic signature. But the whole analysis of such data is extremely complex, as you know, and the issue scientifically is the reproducibility of any of those results, especially if you're based on, a whole bunch of gene SNPs. Can you really do it the next time round? And maybe transparency will help you and you get more data to check these things out. But the principles, I don't think, are affected. I don't know whether...
Well, no, I mean, I think the principles are exactly the same. I think it's a more extreme case. What I find really interesting is everybody wants to talk about the practicalities of individual patient data sharing and the complexities that throws up, and I don't think we could say anything useful on how to manage that in less than a week of constant speaking. I find it fascinating, though, that everybody wants to talk about that and nobody wants to talk about summary results. We act as if this has been fixed. The best currently available evidence is the HTA review, but since then there have been further studies, for example, one published in PLOS just last month, which looks at the most recent 3 years' worth of trials registered on clinicaltrials.gov and finds again that only half are published within 2 years. We've completely failed on this, and I want to know why everybody wants to talk about individual patient data and nobody wants to talk about summary results, when that is the clear, easy win to improve patient care, and when it is an unanswerable case, where there is no legitimate reason for withholding summary results. And I wonder if it's because we're all quite techie people in this room, so we like difficult technical problems. We don't like difficult cultural problems. And also I think the issue of access to summary results has kind of got the stench of failure around it, because people have been talking about it since at least 1986, and we failed to fix it. And actually also, I suspect some of you probably recognise that if you stand up and talk about it, as I have, as an early career researcher and relatively junior doctor, that you get smeared because people don't want to talk about it. And so, I get that you want to have a really interesting conversation about what kind of escrow strategies can we have, and SAS are building this brilliant system that everyone can get into where GSK can't see Behringer's data, but a third-party researcher can get summary results out of all of it being pulled. And that's really interesting. But I wish that you could all be as interested in the issue of summary results, because I can't make informed decisions about which treatment is best for my patients because information is being withheld right now, today, about the drugs that I'm prescribing right now today.
Can I make a quick comment on the with the individual patient data issue, Ben? I think that little bit of the EMEA's policy to validate their decision making and so on, it's you can't, an independent researcher can't recreate the summary level data. They can't recreate the analyses unless they have the individual patient data. So in a way, part of EMA's policy kind of requires it in order to.
But there are endless trials where we don't even have. We're not talking about trying to reproduce the summary results. There are whole trials where we have no information about the methods or results at all of those trials. That's a public health emergency, and everybody wants to talk about how difficult it is to share individual patient data.
See, I'm not. I don't have an issue about sharing summary level data. Personally, I don't understand it. But all I'm saying is that some of the discussion around individual patient data is partly due to this desire to take a pharma-reported study and not just accept its summary data, but let's get hold of the real data and figure out, what the real answer is. I think that there are some, there's something behind that, but I do agree that for the vast majority of public good that you're trying to access, having availability of the summary level data should, in and of itself, be sufficient. And I personally agree that it's hard to imagine why there would be an issue in making summary level data available.
Well, I thought your slide about what can be done with individual patient data was actually very, very good and very useful. And you say that it can be used to validate somebody's own analyses of their own trial data, and of course that is one use, but it's only one use. I mean, we know that that's important because we know, for example, if we look at Vioxx, for example, I don't want to use the wrong word here, but the fact that you couldn't really see that there was a harmful signal in there came about because of the way that the data was analysed, and there was, some have argued, obfuscation around there. Access to individual patient data was clearly valuable and important in that situation. It would have helped to spot that flawed, if we want to be generous, analysis. But also, all of the other examples you gave are really, really important. If we want to know, is it really true that that antidepressants, SSRI antidepressants, are more effective in people with severe depression? At the moment, all we can do is bundle up the trials which have inclusion criteria of more severe depression or mild and moderate depression. But actually, we know when we start looking at IPD from these trials that people break the inclusion and exclusion criteria routinely, or people get screened and then included, but then their actual baseline HAM-D depression score or BDI is completely different. So we can get enormously important information from pooling together that kind of information. But the thing that I found most strange about your presentation, and I don't want to say anything mean.
Oh, go ahead. I don't mind. People have said a lot worse, I promise you.
You spoke as if all industry analyses of their own data are absolutely perfect, and if anybody else tried to have a go at it, then they would get it wrong. Now,
No.
that is simply not the case. You say that in support of licensure, but this is this is not all trials. This is the trials that are given over in support of an initial marketing authorization. And I could give you endless examples of crap analyses by industry. I mean, all of the trials in the paper on SSRIs, where we saw it switched from 38 positive results to 48 positive results, where they turned 11 trials with negative results into trials with positive results. Those are all industry trials that were spun and the analysis was rigged. So we don't have a world in which there is the dichotomy, which I think you sought to set up, and it may have been accidental, in which there are perfect industry analyses that are perfectly regulated, and then other people want to come along and do haphazard stuff. And crucially, secondly, there will always be some crap work out there. You were concerned that the public would be misled by some inconsistent observational epidemiology. Well, welcome to the real world. Welcome to my world. We have to make decisions based on inconsistent data. We critically appraise it, and there is a rich ecosystem out there of doctors and researchers and organisations like Cochrane who critically appraise this stuff, who review it, who come to informed judgments about what's best. And I think you implicitly seek to replace that rich ecosystem of people transparently and openly criticising each other's work with a single monotheistic authority of a regulator. You perhaps want more transparency for that regulator in the conversations that they have, having the but you want the monotheistic regulator. And I don't think that reflects the character of science. I also don't think it's very safe, and I also don't think it's very realistic in an environment where the credibility of regulators has been reasonably undermined. We know that regulators in all fields, we know that the regulators of the energy industry get captured by the big six players. You know, we don't take things entirely on trust. We need transparency, and we also have to remember that the best currently available precedent for industry or a regulator aggressively policing access to data is Roche, in which they argued that Cochrane were not technically competent to conduct a systematic review and meta-analysis. That is the best currently available precedent we have for what happens if we allow industry to take control of who has access to their information. They argue that Cochrane, probably the organisation has done more systematic reviews and meta-analyses than anybody else, arguably the ones that invented the core methods and popularised them, that they're not competent. So I think, you know, we don't live in a world of perfect industry analyses, and we have to accept a rich ecosystem with flawed stuff. And if somebody does a crap analysis and they don't give their stats analysis plan beforehand, I'm perfectly capable of saying, that's a crap analysis and you didn't give your SAP.
Yeah,
Sorry if that was long.
No, you make lots and lots of points. First, just to kind of go back, I didn't want to give the impression that all industry analyses are perfect. I mean, just the ones I do. No. That's not what I was trying to articulate, and obviously not done it clearly enough, is that within the context of the EMEA and their transparency policy, so they are making available the information that's been given to them, which I accept is only a small, like you saw Catherine's iceberg, but in the process of, it just seemed to me to be strange that the EMEA would have a set of standards. Now, how effectively they hold companies to account, we can debate, but they have a set of standards to which companies are held to account in the evaluation and submission of such data beforehand. And it seems strange to me that they then take the step of releasing that information through their policy and not requiring the same standards to be applied, not requiring those receiving that information to comply to the same set of standards. That's the point I'm making. Now, whether that would make everything tickety-boo is a different matter, but it does seem very strange.
But I think the problem is you're arguing for a world.
No. The flip side would be is what is the disadvantage? In what way is it? Let's say it another way. If the post-release standards that the EMA are not applying, if it's okay to do a whole bunch of to put forward an evaluation without some kind of plan as to what the analysis is that you're going to do, which is more or less what I was getting at. If that's okay to do that, and from that we can gain, the EMA believe you can gain information and make public health decisions and so on and so forth, why can't the same set of standards be applied beforehand then? Why isn't there just one set of standards? I'm not talking...
Because it's risky to have a single adjudicator on the quality of science, and it's risky for that to be the regulator. So nobody is saying for 1 minute that it is okay to do a crap post hoc analysis with no statistical analysis plan. Nobody's saying that's good. Nobody's saying we're going to swallow the results of that and make clinical decisions on the basis of that. The problem is you cannot realistically hope to have one organisation, the EMA, adjudicating on the entire scientific community's
but that's not
work.
But I'm not suggesting that.
Because that is what you're saying. Because you're saying the EMA should make a decision about whether somebody's analysis is of an acceptable quality.
No, what I said was you can't have one body. I mean, they're not the adjudicators of all things that's scientifically sound, but they are the adjudicators of the quality of scientific evaluation that goes into them in support of getting a drug licensed. That's everybody here is subject to that. Now, if that self-same organisation are saying, now I'm going to release this information that I've just ensured comply to a whole set of standards, I'm going to release that out there, and I'm going to put that forward. I'm not going to ask that the requester has anybody competent to do analysis. I'm not going to ask the requester whether they even have a plan as to what their analysis will be. You can just do what you like.
That's not quite what the EMA are proposing. But
well, that's what's written in their guidance. It reads that way, and it makes me a little suspicious that part of that is a kind of reaction to being told off by the ombudsman, that they kind of say, okay, bang, we'll put it all out there, and you can do what you like, and we're not going to be applying the same set of standards as beforehand, because somehow that kind of says, well, we're done. we've addressed our issue that we were criticised, and that's how it can read when you read their policy. Now, it could change. We got to the end of the year, but it reads like that right now, I think.
I think if we crystallise the disagreement that we have, I mean, firstly, to be absolutely clear, this is a slightly ridiculous argument because I think everybody should post their statistical analysis plans in public.
We can agree on that.
But I can understand why the EMA have done what they do, because I think people should, but I wouldn't make it mandatory that they have to. And I think the disagreement that we have is, you think that the quality of statistical analyses of trial data should be policed by an individual body, and I think that they should be policed by the academic and medical community, who already have to deal with the fact that there is a barrage of crap research out there all the time.
And
I
on
think
that point, I'm going to suggest we cut that discussion, hold that thought, and I'm going to ask for more questions.
Can I ask a question?
Sorry, could you give your name and affiliation first?
My name's Neil Hounslow. I'm from COA, a small company that nobody's ever heard of. The discussion has focused on phase 3 trials and particularly on the regulatory approval, which is a snapshot in time. But it seems to me that the studies that you're looking at are like the aeroplanes that have come back with holes in their petrol tanks. The missing data, the studies that have been downed, are for drugs which have either not completed a development program, so the regulators never get to see, and of course for the phase 4 studies. And all of the examples that you've given of drugs that have had to be withdrawn from the market because of problems have actually come to grief because of phase 4 studies. And if there had been widespread review at the time of their approval, I think probably everybody would have agreed that they warranted approval. So what's causing a lot of discussion at the moment is about dealing with EMEA and what EMEA is doing. But I suspect that there's very little to gain from a widespread review of a group of studies that EMEA have just reviewed. EMEA do get to see all of the studies, and they will get to hear about the studies that are being conducted in Russia and Mexico and India. And they may or may not get to see the data. It depends what they're interested in. Usually they're interested in studies which are done in, Europe and the US. And I just wonder whether we're focusing, the focus is too much really on what's happening at the regulatory stage.
I've no interest in phase 3 trials as a special case. The All Trials campaign is called the All Trials campaign for a very good reason. We are interested in all the trials that have been conducted in any part of the world, on all of the uses, licensed or unlicensed, of all of the treatments currently being used by doctors and healthcare professionals around the world. And that's the problem. Nobody can give you that list. The European Medicines Agency cannot give you that list. Nobody can tell you all of the trials that have been done on Tamiflu. Nobody can tell you all of the trials that have been done on any drug. And when you tell the public that, they go, well, how many people work in this industry? What on earth are you playing at? Now, as you go further back in time, it gets more and more difficult to have a hope of creating a comprehensive list, and there are shadier corners. For example, if one part of a company in one part of the world gives a grant to a third party to do a piece of research, then that may be more difficult to find than GSK doing their own trial on their own thing 5 minutes ago. But I'm amazed at how unflustered the medical and academic and industry community has allowed itself to be over the simple urgency of just creating a simple list. And it's very interesting when you talk to policymakers, who are actually, many of them, I would say, quite angry with not just industry, but their own civil servants and regulators. And I won't name any names here. It's nobody I've mentioned so far. But I think some of them are quite angry with the people who are working for them, because when I've gone along to speak with very senior members of UK and other governments, they have said, but we were told that we've got trial registers that have all of this stuff on. And when you start explaining to them, well, the European Trials Register is just all the trials done within a European nation since 2004, and it doesn't really include this and that, they just look amazed. They assumed, because I think they were either implicitly or explicitly misled by their own staff, They assumed that this was a list of all the trials. They thought that there was a list of all the trials ever done on paroxetine. They thought there was a list of all the trials ever done on citalopram, duloxetine, on any of these drugs. And they are amazed that there isn't, and the public are amazed that there isn't. And that's why the ABPI have been so eager to smear me, I think, because I have dared to mention this extraordinary flaw in the information architecture of evidence-based medicine. So I don't care about phase 3 trials as a special case. Okay. All trials.
But I'm not sure that the ABPI speaks for all of industry, but...
Well, no, they speak for you. I mean, you have to accept that. Stephen Whitehead, when he says these issues are not current, he speaks for you, sir.
He's seen to speak for us, but we're now...
You must, if he does not speak for you, then you must stand up and say, Stephen Whitehead of the ABPI is incorrect to say that these issues are not current. And until you do so, then it is reasonable for policymakers, who I think are not impressed, and for the wider academic and medical community to say, well, how extraordinary, this man who speaks for you says that these issues are not current.
So what can be done to try to fix the issue which is elsewhere? That is that there are, I mean, industry is happily jumping through hoops now, trying to get the phase 3 issue fixed, but there are academic investigators that who are conducting trials that they're not registering. They don't write CSRs. Should they be? You know, are we going to have double standards again, or are we going to have one set of standards for everybody? And indeed, is it going to apply outside of the field of clinical trials? Because there's a lot of discussion about climate change, which is going to have huge effects on everybody, and yet that data is far less opaque, far more opaque rather than clinical trial data in general.
So selective reporting is an issue in psychology and neuroscience absolutely everywhere, and I think, you know, in all of these places it needs to be fixed, but in evidence-based medicine, in the information we use to make decisions about what treatments a patient gets, it's most urgent. But I'm no less animated about the other stuff. You say, what can we do? Is your question, what can we do to get a complete list? Because if it is, I have some concrete examples, and some of them are business opportunities for you in the room. Some of your eyes light up.
Well, partly, but it's...
I mean, there is legislation already, or codes of practice. You know, academic researchers in the UK are already supposed to register, and they just fail to. Actually, one of the best outcomes, I think, of the campaign that we've led is, for example, the Select Committee triggered MRC and NIHR to do a simple audit of compliance with reporting and registration of trials. And actually, that simplest first step, I think, is incredibly important. It's amazing how we don't apply to the world of research the simple tools that we use in clinical medicine all of the time. Routine open audit of compliance with the things that we aspire to comply on is a very simple thing. I'm constantly approached by people from industry who come up to me and say, I mean, realistically, I think industry kind of splits in half, and it's a CEO issue. There are some CEOs who I think are very old school and too big to fail and think they can wish the world in the way they'd like it to be. And there are some who accept that transparency is an inevitability and that they want to show leadership on this issue. But the best companies come to me and they say, look, we think we're actually pretty good, at least since about 2001, or at least since, you know, ICH GCP, maybe 98. We think we're pretty good at registering everything and posting all results. We think we've got about 98% compliance. And I always say, well, just prove it. Do an audit. Like, take the credit. If you have done well, then be open and clear about that. And then secondly, I think what we need, and I'm building this at the moment with the Open Knowledge Foundation, is a database called Open Trials, which is a giant linked index, a database of all information about all trials, for the first time ever, matching together all of the trials that have been conducted and completed, registries, with all of the information that's available about them. Not just results on registries or individual industry repositories or in academic journal articles, but also links to CSRs where they've been made available, press releases where they've been made available, protocols where they've been made available, and so on. And from that, we can then derive secondary variables of the following companies are the worst for missing data, the following sites are the worst, the following PIs are the worst, the following countries are the worst, and also the best. And I think routine open audit and at least the ambition to create a single coherent list are the way forwards. And you know, that is what the public and actually policymakers think that we have been doing since the year dot. They are blown away that this is a new idea, and they are blown away that the idea that somebody saying we should do this receives such an extraordinary reaction from organisations like the ABPI, and actually much less so really from FPIA, who I think are sort of widely regarded as a more serious organisation.
So on that note, I think we'll allow one more question. Do I see a hand over there?
Sorry, I really...
Yeah. One more question, then we'll take a tea break.
Okay. Sorry, Andy Kenwright. I work for a small organisation called Roche Pharmaceutical. I just had to say something. From Kevin's talk, I realised that I'm on omeprazole. I have high cholesterol. I had a granddad who worked on World War II planes, and I work on orphan niche indications. And now I've obviously the Tamiflu and the Roche thing connecting as well. I just wanted to say that I think with access to clinical trial data in the future, I think we will see the extent of our conservatism within a lot of the analyses that we do. As a statistician, I work for patients, 20-odd years in the industry, and I don't work to get a Porsche. I don't work for the money in that way. I work for the patients. And we fight all the time as statisticians to protect the blind, to protect against bias as far as we can. And I think that will come out. But I don't have that many arguments with Ben, actually, even though I work for Roche, on clinical trials data being more readily available. But when we talk about the statement, access to clinical trial data offers potential to provide new insights, I agree, and especially across compounds and across companies where I think we've failed. But I think there's a very, very real danger that access to that data to certain people offers the potential to give misleading results, which will be interpreted blown out of all proportion and cause harm to patients, to my patients, to ourselves. So for me, it's just I wanted the discussion really as how you think we can mitigate against that, because we know this will happen, and we know there is a potential for harm.
But there are crap analyses published all the time in the academic literature, and they're laughed at, or they're derided, or some people who aren't very bright take them seriously. But you would be contributing a tiny, tiny uplift in the overall quantity of the crap work published in the endlessly ballooning academic literature. And actually, individual patient data has been pooled and shared for decades now. So if the thing that you're worried about is going to happen, it will already have happened. So could you give an example of a situation where sharing of individual patient data from clinical trials has led to the public and clinicians being misled in large numbers and then changing their behaviour and then an impact on morbidity or mortality?
Not a specific example. It's just the worry in my mind.
The fact that it's never happened, the fact that you can't give an example, even though individual patient data sharing has happened for a long time, I think is very reassuring. And also the fact that we already have a rich ecosystem for dealing with bad quality research. I mean, my column or any review of the journals that people do on a weekly basis, like Richard Lehrman, you'll see trials all the time published in top 5 journals that are crap. They switch their primary outcome. They do an pre-specified subgroup analysis. They measure a surrogate outcome that's never been validated. We already have bad trials in the world. We already have bad analyses in the world. The sky hasn't fallen in, and I think the risks outweigh the benefits. And it's a bit like any other problem that a regulator faces. It's about trading off between the risks and the benefits. And I think the risks, which industry are suspiciously keen to talk up, I think are greatly outweighed by the benefits. And I don't mean to be mean when I say that.
No, that's okay. I think it really is in my mind is the media more than anything, and that is the big worry. And you're obviously talking about measles vaccinations. It's a separate thing, but it is a big media furore, which I think there is a big risk. There's a lot of big data to come out, and there is a bigger risk than we think.
If we're worried about public trust and the public being misled, I've probably written more than almost anybody else, with the definite exception of Brian Deere, about the measles and MMR hoax, as I think it now is been come to be shown. The reason why stories about industry hiding information about the harms of medicines, the reason why those stories are believable to the public is because it does actually happen, right? When the public see the representative of AbbVie at the launch of the FPIA transparency plan standing up and saying adverse event reports are commercially confidential information, That's what makes the MMR measles hoax believable to the general public. You do not increase public trust in medicine by hiding information from the public, by withholding it from doctors and researchers. If we want public trust, if we want to stop stupid stories like the MMR autism hoax, then we have to improve transparency, not reduce it.
I agree, but I think we need to extend some of the very good statistical practices that we have in the industry and practices around data handling and rules and documentation as that comes out.
Yeah, I know we've run out. I'm going to make one quick comment if I can. The issue, because I know we've run out of time, the issue, you asked for an example, Ben. I mean, within the context of drug regulation, as imperfect as it is, there are many examples of sponsors who've come forward with flaky, post-hoc, subset, failed trial, let's figure out a way to make positive analyses, and just they get knocked back. You see them publicly sometimes in the advisory committee process in the FDA, where they just expose people and say, look, this is bad, this is not good enough, go away. And the reason that we're all under this huge number of regulations in industry is to precisely stop that stuff happening. Now, I'm not saying it works or it's fantastically effective, but there's a bunch of standards in place to prevent crazy stuff. That's where the regulators put them in place. And I think it's fair to say that when you release some of these data into the public domain, especially from clinical trials on big drugs from big companies, there is this unease, this kind of sense that there is a kind of long line of folks who want to go out and prove by access to some of the individual patient data how bad pharma really are, and they'll do that in an environment where they're not subject to the same set of constraints that were applied at the time the analysis was done. But I understand what you said, but there is this broader argument that you're offering that says the academic world in and of itself, through the process of science and peer review and everything else, should weed out the rubbish. I understand that. The truth of the matter is I don't know that really works brilliantly well. I'm not saying that the industry, the regulations we're under works any better, but at least it's a codified, laid down set of minimum standards that they say you must walk this line, otherwise it won't wash its face. So I think that's what people talk about.
Phase 4 trial? You're just giving up on Phase 4 trials. You're giving up on trials of unlicensed uses. I mean,
all clinical trials produce.
On that note,
that's not true. That's not true. We'll have to go, but that assertion is false because it's still it's a trial sponsored by. It's still run by the industry. They're still subject to a whole bunch of.
On that note, we are going to stop for tea and coffee. We are allowed 5 minutes by the organisers, so I propose any discussions follow on in the tea break. Thank you very much indeed.